All right, so I appreciate that, Lisa, and Miss Gross as well. It's really a pleasure to be able to speak with you all this evening. Want to go over some updates from the NCAA, just things that we're dealing with, and ways that I can help you all be more, versed in some of the requirements and some of those things that you all need to know. So a little bit about me. My name is Barrington Huntley. I've been working at the NCAA now about 4 years. So been doing that now. I actually grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. So I grew up right there in DeKalb County. I went to Chamblee High School. So the fact that I get this opportunity to give back to my community, it's one that I'm really excited about. Um, in my role, I really make sure that schools in Georgia and Florida specifically have all of the most accurate and up-to-date information for all things NCAA initial eligibility. So we'll kind of go over, that's a little bit about me, kind of what we'll go over today. I'll touch on registration, then I'll touch on the initial eligibility standards, what those are in normal times. Then I'll talk about the COVID-19 changes that have been put in place. We'll talk a little bit about amateurism. I'll go over some other updates, and then I'll have a bunch of resources at the end, in some of those slides at the end that will help you all be able to navigate in the future. So my goal is to send a PDF version of this presentation to Lisa and Ms. Gross, and they can send it out to anybody that they want, after that. Once you get that PDF version of the presentation, there will be links included, throughout this presentation. When you get that PDF, all of those links will be clickable. So you won't be able to click them right now, but when you get that PDF, if you do request it, they'll be clickable there. So the first thing we're going to talk about is registration. Any student who's interested in playing Division I or Division II college sports, any sport, they're going to have to be registered with the NCAA Eligibility Center. That's the department of the NCAA that I work in, and that's the department of the NCAA that certifies student athletes to play college sports at the Division I and the Division II level. There's going to be two parts of the certification. The first is going to be amateurism, and the next one is going to be academic certification. So those two make up the certifications that they'll need. In order to get registered, the student will need to go to eligibilitycenter.org right here. You see the arrow in the middle, they'll click on there, and that will begin that process for them to get registered. When they register, there's going to be two options. Two types of different accounts that they can register for. The first is going to be the profile page account. This is a free account that really allows students, I recommend this account for like students that are pretty early in the process. So maybe you have some middle schoolers that that are going to be coming in, some 9th graders, some 10th graders. Those are the students that I recommend the profile page account for. It's free, and it allows students to start getting information from the NCAA about what it means to be a college athlete. They can go over some of those requirements, initial eligibility. They'll get recruiting updates. Those kinds of things come as a benefit of being registered for the profile page account. If a student wants to get certified to play Division I or Division II, they're going to need our next account type. That's the certification account. So having the profile page account is good because it generates an NCAA ID number that they'll need whenever they're being recruited by colleges. They can give that number out to colleges, and colleges will be able to use that number, look them up, add them to their recruiting list. But once they know, hey, I'm being recruited, it's sophomore year, junior year, I have a couple schools looking at me, transferring over to that certification account is what they're going to need in order for us to perform that amateurism and academic certification. They would also need it if they wanted to take an official visit. That's a visit that's going to be paid for by the college that's recruiting them. They would also need it if they're going to be signing an NLI. So really important that the students who are going to play college athletics ultimately get that certification account. There is a fee associated with getting a certification account, as you see right there. It's going to be $90. That is waivable if if you're dealing with a student that has that qualifies for free or reduced lunch or receives a fee waiver for the SAT or the ACT. It'll be up to the counselor to be able to, it'll be up to the counselor to add that or make that request of the NCAA to have a fee waiver applied to a student's account. And, just being honest, it's not like a huge process. Like, I mean, it just say, hey, do they qualify? It's not like we're going to be tracking or anything like that. It really runs on the honor system. A student also, as part of registering and wanting us being able to perform a certification on their account, they need to be on an IRL. So that is an institution request list. In the most basic terms, all an IRL is a list of all of the students that a college is recruiting. So, the only reason I bring this up is, it's not going to be a huge deal for a student that is being recruited by 5 or 6 schools. They're going to be on an IRL, but you might see it sometimes for a student that's being recruited late in the process, or a student that is maybe kind of floating under the radar a little bit. So this is a slide that's brought up just to see maybe if there's any, like if you're doing any sort of like troubleshooting, hey, what's the delay on my account? Why can't I get certified yet? This could be a question that you ask of the college that's recruiting you. You reach out to their compliance department, you reach out to the coach that's recruiting you, and just ask, hey, am I on an IRL? Am I on your IRL? Oh man, we didn't add you yet. We'll get you added, and then that certification can happen from there. So this is kind of a visual of what I talked about. You have a student athlete. Are they on an IRL? They need to be on the IRL. Are they going to be taking an official visit? Are they going to be signing an NLI? If the answer to those questions is yes, then they would need that certification account. And as I mentioned, the certification account has 2 parts, academic and amateurism. So we'll go over the initial eligibility standards now. So the gold standard for Division I, this is what I encourage all students to aim for. It's going to be, there's really 4 parts to our initial eligibility standards. The first is going to be the core course requirement. So making sure that a student is taking the right number of courses, the right courses and the right number of courses, making sure that they have a high enough GPA, making sure that their test score is high enough, and then finally that they graduate from high school. Those are the rules as they are legislated for the NCAA. So when we're talking about Division I does have a couple special rules within that. First, we're focused on, are they taking the right courses and the right number of courses? So you'll see there, they have to take 16 core courses. We're focused on the big courses, those core courses, English, math, science, social studies, foreign languages. Those types of courses are the ones that we are basing their initial eligibility standards off. So they have to take 16 of those. I always tell people you take 4 each year of high school and the student will be fine. But 16 of those, 10 of those 16 have to be completed before the start of your senior year. So that's a rule in Division I that can sometimes trip up some students. You need to make sure from the time they come in 9th grade that they have that kind of planned out. But 10 of the 16 have to be completed before the start of the senior year. And then 7 of those 10 actually have to be in English, math, or science. They have to earn at least a 2.3 GPA in those 16 core courses. And then they have to have a high enough test score. The reason I say high enough test scores is on a sliding scale in the NCAA. The lower the test score, the lower the GPA, the higher the test score that a student is going to need, and vice versa. So if they have a high GPA, they're going to need a lower test score. Again, making sure that students are placing an emphasis on doing well in their core courses in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade will give them a lot of breathing room when it comes to taking the test as they move through high school. Finally, you get that proof of graduation, and you meet all of these requirements, the student will have they'll be eligible to receive their scholarship, practice, and compete in their first year of college enrollment. Here's a subject area breakdown for Division I qualifier. As you see there, English is the big one. So making sure, again, 4 core courses, all 4 years of high school, and one of those 4 every year should be English. That will ensure that a student is meeting their 16 core and is also meeting that 10-7 requirement, because that would put them at 12 courses after this at the beginning of their senior year. So definitely something to keep in mind there. For Division II, we are looking at 16 core courses again, but there is no 10-7 requirement, no core course progression requirement. So in Division II, students have from the time that they start high school all the way up until they enroll in college to be able to complete those 16 core. So it is a little bit of a lower standard in Division I, or excuse me, in Division II. The GPA requirement is also a little bit lower at 2.2. You still have to get the graduation in there as well, but you meet those things at the Division II level, and a student will be able to qualify for their scholarship, be able to practice and compete in their first year of enrollment. Subject area breakdown in D2, a little bit different. You see it's less English, but those still are going to add up to those 16. We're still really concerned about those core courses. Again, just making, all the courses, they might be taking music, they might be taking business, they might be taking, PE. All of these courses, I think, are important and might be required by the state of Georgia as far as graduation requirements, but we are really concerned with the core courses that a student is taking. So the big one here is going to be the COVID changes that have been put in place. So I did just go over that. We're concerned about which classes the students are taking, that they have a high enough GPA, that's big for us as well, that they graduate high school, and then the test score is also part of it. Due to all of the uncertainty around the availability of testing that's gone on with all things related to COVID-19, the NCAA has not required the test score for the last 3 classes. So for people who graduated in 2020, for students who graduated in 2021, and now, as it came out last week, for students who are going to be graduating in 2022, those students will not be required by the NCAA to have a test score to be certified as eligible. I will note, though, there are colleges and scholarship programs that might still require those test scores. So I know I do a lot of work in Florida. I know Florida was one of the states that did require a student to have a test score on file to be admitted to their state universities. So that's something to think about. Also, you might have a student who's looking for merit-based scholarships, or might look to be playing in Division II or Division III, where they might not get a full scholarship. So, making sure that they understand the requirements of the scholarship program that they're applying to with those merit-based scholarships is something that they want to keep in mind as well. So, especially the juniors, my advice would be, if they have the opportunity to take the SAT or the ACT, go ahead and do it, but it is not required by the NCAA. And I can answer any questions on that as we get to the end of the presentation, but this came out last week as being applied to the class of 2022. So Division III is kind of in its own boat. We don't do any certifications for Division III student athletes. It's really going to be up to the colleges themselves to determine the admission, financial aid, practice and competition. We still do recommend a Division III student athlete register for the profile page, but like I mentioned earlier, that's free and it will only help them make a more informed decision. So if you have a student that doesn't meet the initial eligibility standards that I just went over, so let's say they don't meet the qualifier standards, then they would unfortunately have to come here. So Division I has a lower standard called an academic red shirt. There's no 10-7 requirement, so they still have to get their 16 core, but they don't have to have 10 before the start of their senior year in order to be certified as an academic red shirt. There's also a lower GPA standard and a lower test score requirement, but with that lower standard comes certain things that the student athlete can't do in their first year of enrollment, as you see there. If a student is certified in Division I as an academic red shirt, they will not be able to compete in their first year of enrollment. Similarly, in Division II, if you have a student who's certified as a partial qualifier, they will not be able to compete in their first year of college enrollment. Division II is a little bit interesting though. As you see in Division I, you have qualifier and academic red shirt. In Division II, you only have qualifier, and if a student doesn't meet qualifier, they're certified as a partial qualifier. And it doesn't matter by how much they missed the qualifier standard in Division II. That's something new that was just put in place. So Division I has qualifier, academic red shirt, and then if you don't meet academic red shirt in Division I, you're going to be a non-qualifier. And if a student ends up in this position, in this unfortunate position, but they're still lucky enough to have a college recruiting them, the best thing I could do is tell them to continue to work with the college that is recruiting them. There might be some legitimate reason for why they missed the initial eligibility requirements, and that college could maybe file for some relief on their behalf, so that they could get eligible. But again, those waivers, it's not a sure thing, but working with the college that's recruiting them is the best advice that I could give if you have a student that ends up as a non-qualifier in Division I. So amateurism is going to be the next part of the certification, and that all that is really just a series of questions that we ask, just to make sure that students are not professionalizing themselves in any way. If you have students that are going to be enrolling in next fall, then April 1st was the first date to where they could go into their account and request that final amateurism. And then it's going to be October 1st for students that are going into college that following winter or spring. And like I said, all it is a series of questions. All it is a series of questions that we ask, like I said, just making sure that they're not in any kind of agreement to play professionally, and that they haven't received any prize money above actual and necessary expenses. So students can receive, you have a girl on a club softball team and they're paying for her to travel to Minnesota to play, in a tournament over the summer. That's not something that we're concerned about. Those are actual necessary expenses. Anything above that could potentially cause an issue. Anything like what you're seeing here on the screen could potentially cause an issue. But I can tell you right now, we have about 94% of student athletes who come through our system that have no issue whatsoever. And of those 6% that do, it's mainly international and basketball domestically. So very small percentage, but just wanted to make sure that you all knew that is that second part of the certification process. I want to emphasize here, it's a shared responsibility. High school counselors, coaches, parents, compliance officers, myself, we all play a huge role in this process. And knowing that you play that huge role, I think it's important to avail yourself of all of the information that can help these students make the most smooth and seamless transition from high school to college. it's a really important that you understand that responsibility that you have, but then also communicating the fact that the students do have some ownership of the responsibility as well, being available, making sure that they know to ask questions, making sure that they're not scared to ask any questions, taking some ownership of that as well falls on their shoulders too. So now I'll talk a little bit about some of the other updates that are kind of floating around out there. We do have the NCAA dead period. A dead period, this is recruiting that we're talking about right now. And I'm sure maybe there was either some parents or some other administrators or coaches that might have wanted to know about this, but a dead period means that students cannot have face-to-face, on-campus or off-campus interaction with an athletic department staff member or a coach. So that was something that was put in place back in, it's been over a year now in Division I, but it will end starting June 1st. So June 1st in Division I, the dead period will be lifted and students will be able to have that in-person contact with their students. So it's gonna hopefully help those students get back some of the opportunities that have been a little bit tougher to come by in this pandemic environment that we're dealing with. Division II has been in what we call a quiet period since about late fall. And a quiet period means that students could come onto campus, but they couldn't meet off campus with a coach. So Division II, I think, is always an option. You have so many students sometimes. I know, when I was coming up through the ranks, I was so focused on Division I, but Division II can really be a good option. If it's gonna, ease the burden of paying for a college education. So just keeping that in mind is something that students can take advantage of. Next, we have the transfer rules. So recently in Division I, there was a change to the transfer rules. In normal times, or before the rule came out, there was 5 sports that a student, if they played in one of those 5 sports, couldn't transfer from a 4-year college in Division I to another 4-year college in Division I without having to sit out a year. That restriction has been taken away. So if you're in those 5 sports, men's basketball, women's basketball, football, men's ice hockey, and baseball. So if you're in one of those 5, you had that restriction before. Now that has been lifted. So students are free to transfer, starting in the fall. The only reason I bring it up to this group is, I'm curious to see how it's going to play out. I know there's a lot of, I think it could potentially put high schools, in a tougher situation. Coaches are going to have to make decisions in college. Do you want to recruit that 22-year-old women's basketball or the 21-year-old women's basketball player who's transferring from another school, or do you want to maybe recruit the 17-year-old who's coming out of high school who might take a couple years but has a little more potential? Like, my hope is that it won't hurt high school recruiting, but we won't really know how it's going to play out, at least for a couple of years. And lastly, we have name, image, likeness that has been in the news and has been coming up. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. There should be some sort of decision on a Supreme Court case that we have right now. The decision should come sometime over the summer, and that could affect what amateurism looks like, or what, the students, what ability they have to use their name, image, and likeness. So I'm on a group that is really taking the education efforts, and is really directing the education efforts. So, and with my responsibility, it's making sure that I can educate the high school community on how any of these potential changes to name, image, likeness could affect the high school community. So when I know more about that, I'll definitely make sure that I get that out to my contacts. And like I mentioned, we have a lot of resources. So there's, resources if you have a student that has a documented education impacting disability. There's going to be resources available for them, certain accommodations that could be available to allow them to still meet the requirements, but just with certain accommodations. We also have this page that, again, I will make sure is included in the PDF version. This will be extremely, extremely helpful for anyone who needs any kind of information about what's going on with the NCAA. So there's two resources on this page that I really want to draw people's attention to. The first is going to be that COVID-19 frequently asked questions document. That, again, it will go over the changes, obviously the big one being the test score for the juniors. It will go over that. There's also any other kind of questions that could go a little bit more in depth when it comes to the COVID-19 changes that have been put in place. Also under, it's that last orange bullet, the first resource under that last orange bullet, the guide for the college-bound student athlete. That is probably our most comprehensive resource. And it's something that I even use, in my day-to-day. It has everything from initial eligibility to recruiting, to amateurism, everything that you could possibly want to ask. You have a women's, have a girl swimmer, and you want to know, when can I talk to coaches, or what, how early can I communicate with coaches? Those kinds of things, all of that will be included in that guide for the college-bound student athlete. We also have a great social media team. Anyone who wants to stay up to date in real time with what's going on in the NCAA Eligibility Center and the NCAA at large, I would recommend, I see Instagram, I see Facebook there, but our Twitter is really the one that, gives you the information you need in a bite-sized format, and can really be something that you just check in, every so often to see what's going on. Everything that I talked about here today was posted there last week as well. So, it's just with what the type of role that you play, whether that's a parent, whether that's an administrator, whether that's a coach, being up to date with this information and being able to communicate that and becoming a resource for the students, it's going to be super important. And following our Twitter will definitely help you there. You can pull out your phone, scan in the QR code, and give us a follow. I will open it up to questions. Like I said, I wanted to make sure that we had some time available for that. Here's a couple numbers that you can call in if you have further questions. Also, my email address. No, I was going to say, also my email address is going to be included right there as well. So yeah, I'll open it up, see if anybody has anything. But yeah, again, I just want to, I'm extremely grateful to be able to kind of, be a resource. This is the first time that I've gotten to talk to you